A very good morning to everybody. Hope we didn't keep you in suspense too long. So again, my name is Zubin. Thank you all for being here in person. It is great to be back at an in-person event after so long, seeing new and old friends and colleagues. Just to give you a bit of my background before I start to talk about the future of health rather than healthcare. I'm an orthopedic surgeon by training. I left the full-time practice. I still remain a practicing clinician, and I'm a bit of a doctorpreneur. So I kind of straddle the clinical and corporate worlds. I also lead the PwC Singapore Health Industries practice. So I'm going to share a bit of a unique perspective, that of a practicing clinician, that we see in the corporate world, and hopefully we get a good discussion going. So on that, to start, was asked to talk a little bit about the future of healthcare. And the reason I've canceled the care word out, because I think we've all moved to an area where we're kind of looking at the future of health rather than healthcare, and I see a lot of nodding heads. So on that, the future of healthcare, and then the future of hospitals, and ultimately today's Digital Surgery Summit is really to focus on the future of the operating theater or the operating room. So I'm going to share a bit of a perspective of each of these, and then we're going to go into a bit more depth with the subsequent speakers. So let's start by me sharing some perspectives. As I've said, we've moved from an era of providing healthcare to health. Our former Minister of Health here in Singapore, Minister Gan Kim Yong, said the 3 beyonds in 2016, moving from healthcare to health, hospital to home, and quality to value-based care. And that's exactly what we're seeing. These 3 trends aren't just unique to Singapore or the region, but we're seeing this globally. We've started moving from valuation to actually providing value, whether you're a startup, whether you're a corporate, whether you're a provider. It's all about providing value, and providing value to all stakeholders, not just your own entity. We've also started to see what I like to call moving from virtual, augmented, and mixed reality to reality. These are not new technologies. They've been used for years, and I'll share some examples shortly. But it's not about the future. It's actually what's already here today. We've moved from high-tech to realizing that the human touch is still important. So solutions need to be high-tech as well as high-touch. You have to keep that human perspective when you come up with a solution. And lastly, I think what we've moved from is living in the traditional healthcare system to what we like to call, at least at PwC, the new health economy. And in this new health economy, we essentially are seeing new entrants, so startups and companies that were traditionally never in the healthcare space or health space. We're seeing them use new technologies, come up with new business models, even coming up with new ways of financing themselves to ultimately deliver new healthcare solutions. I've put here patients on the right, just because as a practicing clinician, I always like to remind people that no matter who you are, whether you're a Hill-Rom Baxter, whether you're a provider, a regulator, a payer, it doesn't matter who you are. Ultimately, the end user in this ecosystem are patients, and we have to keep them at the center of what we do. Care as we know it needs to be, and in fact has already become, what you see here on the slide. It has become predictive. It has become preventative. It's become personalized, but I actually like to say it's become hyper-personalized. With a lot of the solutions that we're seeing today, personalized isn't enough. And last of all, it's become very, very participatory. Consumers today are on 24/7. They get involved in the care that they receive. They come with a lot more information than they did previously, and it's difficult to manage that sometimes. Whether it's in the operating theater, as the topic today is, or whether we're out of it, today it ultimately is all about connected care. And so connected operating theater, connected surgery. Care today needs to be what you see here, and I'm not going to go through it all, but essentially we have to provide convenience to all the stakeholders, especially patients. We have to ensure that the quality of care that we deliver remains top-notch. We have to be very supportive. Professor Mahesh Chulani at a recent workshop said that we're so good at delivering care immediately around the patient, that specialty care, but the support we provide more broadly is something that we're not so good at yet. As I said before, we have to personalize it or hyper-personalize it. We're seeing that in every other industry, so why not healthcare? And lastly, we have to improve our communication. Patients and people today want that transparency, want to earn the trust, right? So let's bring to life with a few examples again, not of the future, of some examples that we think are in the future, but actually exist today. So these examples that you see here are some examples of products and services that are already completely revolutionizing the way we do care. On the top left, that cover of Time magazine, that kind of technology already exists. We have contact lenses which have AR and VR displays. We have heads-up displays in the operating theater, in our clinics, etc. Our neighbors next door, this was quite some time ago, 3 or 4 years ago, have made stethoscopes that help us, that complement us as clinicians, not replace us, and help us make diagnoses. A local example, SpeedDoc, is delivering care in the community and at home, and they're using technology solutions to essentially deliver more care than GPs or home visits could traditionally provide. Connectivity and data exchange have already been shown to benefit all stakeholders. One of the things that we might talk about later today is this whole idea of data exchange and data sharing. This is nothing new. Technology exists to allow data to be shared openly. At the end of the day, the question is, whose data is it actually, and who has the right to share that data? But this is an example from years ago that was actually published in the New England Journal of Medicine. PwC US developed a data exchange. This is more than 7 or 8 years ago. And they involved all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, so it's not just a single solution. It's a collaborative one. And what they showed was that they actually were able to lower the incidence and prevalence of diabetes in a rural area of southern Texas, which had the poorest and lowest socio-demographic population in all of America. They did it by working with the likes of Walmart, CVS, pharma companies, medtech companies, providers, etc. And that fact that it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine shows the data behind it. A lot of people talk about improving their systems and solutions and looking at it through 3 lenses traditionally. Look at it through a people lens, a process lens, and a technology lens. The only thing I wanted to share really is it isn't just about people, but it's about patients. So let's look at it through a patient's process and technology lens. If we look at trends that are seen globally when it comes to healthcare or health, I like to call them the ABCDs. A for artificial intelligence and intelligent automation. B for big data. C for consumerism or patient centricity. And D for digital. These would be 4 trends that we're seeing everywhere, not just locally or regionally. And I've bolded and made that C bigger because personally, when I see different companies doing things, the most successful solutions, and this is outside of healthcare as well, is when you focus on the consumer or the patient. And so I personally feel that that is the most important of these trends. We've seen clinically validated digital twins of the human body already used clinically. Takeda and PwC a couple of years ago used a solution called Body Logical, which is a digital twin. It helps speed up research. It actually tells you the physiological parameters that will change if you do different interventions. So again, this technology exists, and it's not just PwC who has it. A local example, which was a spin-off from our very own A-Star, is a company called Intent.ai. And when I talk about consumer experience and satisfaction, why don't we provide that same level of satisfaction and experience in healthcare as we do in all other industries? I always like to give the example of my wife and myself hardly ever going to the supermarket anymore. I'm sure a lot of you order things online. They come on the same day, if not the next day. We want that experience in healthcare. When you book a hotel, when you book a flight, when you purchase anything, why can't we get that experience in healthcare? The truth is we can. We just need to be a little bit careful about it, ensuring that that quality is not compromised. So this example here has been implemented by a number of providers. It's not another chatbot. It actually is a company that improves chatbots, that trains chatbots. And you can see here by the figures, customer satisfaction up by 3 times. And as a byproduct, sales leads up by 400%. So I always say when we focus on value rather than valuation or capital expenditure, think about it. The byproduct will be an improved customer experience. It will be improved profits for any corporate. Automation and AI solutions already being used as both complements as well as replacers. The example you see here, Vitestro, is a recent machine that basically draws blood. There have been a number of solutions in the market that have tried this. This was a recent one I came across. It's the only reason why I'm sharing it. Pretty interesting. Rather than a complement, this actually does replace the human touch, the phlebotomist. How successful? I've not used it myself, so I won't comment on that. Other examples of where things are being replaced, and please don't get me wrong, I am not an advocate of replacing the human touch. I think we need to use technology to complement it. But there are certain situations where we are unable to provide the care. So the example I share here is Cure.ai. Cure is a company, recently raised a good amount of money. The reason I've shared this is because they've actually got endorsement by the World Health Organization. So that little orange book here that you see, they're one of a few solutions that have been approved to be used without any human intervention to read radiological images, chest x-rays, they do TB screening, they do a number of other things. But in areas where we don't have that provision of care, we can use technology solutions to replace, well, I guess, the non-existent care. Specifically, then, when it comes to surgery and the operating theater, I think AI-enabled AR, VR, and MR solutions are already playing significant roles in the educational, preoperative, intraoperative settings. And again, this is nothing new. In fact, I was looking at the historical wall outside. I don't know how many of you looked at it. A beautifully put together wall in terms of history of surgery by Baxter and Hillrom. If you look back more than 10 years, there's so many technology solutions. And in fact, one of them on that wall, Professor Shafi Ahmed, he's going to be giving 2 talks after this as well about these solutions. These are just some examples, maybe a bit biased because of my orthopedic background. But if you look here, Microsoft HoloLens, their OpenSight AR system, was the first that got FDA cleared, and that was back in 2018. So they obviously started that before, but 4 years ago, they already had FDA clearance. You look at a company called Augmedix, founded in 2014, so 8 years ago, and they got FDA cleared in December 2019. More recently, in 2016, companies like Osso VR, one of the most spoken about companies in social media today, they've totally democratized education as we know it. They started with orthopedics, as you see here in the middle one, and then they've even moved to other specialties like vascular surgery. Other companies like Precision OS also exist, and they have proven the value of virtual reality in the operating room or operating theater. Again, nothing new. The most recent FDA-approved solution was granted to a system, again, to a specialty close to my heart, orthopedics, and specifically spine surgery. This was just last month. You can see here, June 22nd, first fully immersive 3D AR surgical navigation system achieves FDA approval for precision spine surgery. So we're already there. It's not about the future. It's what exists today. And then locally, I thought maybe I'll share one example because we're talking about connected surgery and the use of data, right? So in terms of today's theme, there's a company out of Singapore called Enplasty, right? And I share this example because they really have reimagined connected surgery. So it's now no longer about AR, VR solutions. It's about personalized, or I said earlier, hyper-personalized solutions. They're working with a number of hospitals in Singapore, including our very own National University Hospital. They can take patient data, CT scan data, and recreate that exact anatomy, orthopedic anatomy of someone needing a hip replacement or who has a very deformed hip, for example, where you want to do that practice. And you can practice in AR, VR, MR on that patient itself. So that's where we are today already. If you also thought that, oh, I've mentioned Singapore a lot, or developed countries, you'd be totally wrong. This photo here was shared by my friend and colleague and co-founder of HeroX, Shafi Ahmed, and he's going to talk a little bit about this in his own presentation later this morning. This is in Gaza, I believe. So to conclude things, what if I told you all that in the future, the care in healthcare will not exist? Would you think I'm crazy? Would you think I'm mad? Would you believe me at all? And if you do think that I'm crazy, and you do think that that is totally impossible, let me share 3 things with you. In terms of heart disease, there's a company called iMedrix, and I have no affiliation, no financial conflict of interest to declare. They have a portable ECG, which isn't just a portable ECG, it's a lot more than that, and I won't go into details. But it's FDA cleared, and they are doing screening at population level in Africa and in a number of emerging markets, right? And they are picking up heart disease a lot earlier than when you actually need deep intervention. And then it makes you wonder that, okay, so how are they going to make their money? If I told you that they're working with everybody, I mentioned earlier that it's all about a collaborative ecosystem. Would you believe it if I said that they actually have non-exclusive contracts and relationships with the likes of Siemens, Philips, Medtronic? They do. And everyone is realizing that, you know what, we need to all work together and provide value to the patient. So in that case, I believe that perhaps if we progress in the next 10, 20, 30 years, maybe heart disease will be eradicated. Maybe we pick up diseases early enough that don't require actual treatment that we give today. In terms of cancer, there's a lot of things being done on cancer globally. There's an End Cancer Initiative. There are a number of companies that are playing in this space. But again, a local company, IISG, actually has found an intracellular tumor-specific antigen that's actually found in more than 80% of cancers. They've already done phase 1 and phase 2 trials with excellent results. What if we're starting to see technologies pick up and be able to eliminate cancer so early that it doesn't show up? And in terms of stroke, I've just put this quote of mine I wanted to share, but I didn't call an ambulance. I always think that I'd love to make a video because the way we are going in healthcare is that your doorbell's going to ring, you go and you open the door, and there you see a paramedic waiting for you. And you look at him or her and you say, but I didn't call an ambulance. And they look back at you and say, we know, but you're going to be having a heart attack in the next 15 minutes. And so we're going to take you to a center nearby so we can treat it immediately, right? We think that that's crazy, but that is a very, very likely possibility because we are seeing technologies today that are already predictive of this and have been clinically validated. What if I told you that in the future hospitals aren't going to exist? Just gave these examples, and again, you can see here, this is from 2017, right? This image, there was an actual working prototype, this little vehicle that drives around and provides basic care. Now, maybe a little bit too futuristic. We recently spoke about the future of hospitals on an Economist podcast, so I won't spend time today on that. But even in China, as far back as 2015, a hospital with no patients. Now, whether it was successful or not is a different story. How it evolved is a different story. But we are seeing examples of that already happening. So then the question for today's theme in terms of operating theaters, is it thus possible that in the future surgeons and operating theaters will not exist? And often people ask me, is that why you left full-time practice? Were you scared of losing your job? It wasn't, right? But from an academic point of view, this journal article actually showed that by 2053, you can't see it here, but on the left, there's a list of different professions. And surgeons is the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth from the top. And they predict that by 2053, surgeons won't exist. I personally don't like to think that, but we'll see. But whether they do or not, I don't think operating theaters will not exist in the near future. Maybe, 50, 100 years down the line, depending on what we have in humanity. But I think for the time being, when operating theaters or operating rooms still do exist, it's going to be super important that they provide a truly connected experience for not just the provider, but the patient too. So the example I'll give again is we've traditionally been a little bit hierarchical in healthcare, for lack of a better word, right? In the operating theater, we've always considered it a sacred area. You have to either be the surgeon or the patient or the staff to actually be in there. But why? Why can't the patient's family be there, whether it's physically or virtually? Why can't other people who might have an interest be there? And the truth is they can. And Raphael and Shafi, friends and colleagues, are going to give a couple of examples later, so I won't give them. But they were the first in the world to actually do that, to democratize that. And you know what? It can be done. There are not many problems with that. So for all the reasons that I've shared today, I love sharing a quote from Bill Gates, which is one of my favorite. And it was Bill Gates who said, "We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that occurs in the next 10. And I think that's a nice way of framing it. So what are my key takeaways today before we get going with my colleagues and other speakers? The first thing is, as I said, forget about people, process, and technology, and always think about the patients, not just people. Remember these ABCDs and focus on the consumer, regardless of who you are in this room. It doesn't matter what stakeholder you are, but you have to focus on the patient. It's all about trust and transparency. Even in other industries today, we're seeing the words trust, sustainability, the terms ESG. It's all about that today. And so again, if we are anybody in this healthcare ecosystem, the most important thing to do is actually gain the trust and be transparent with the end user, who are our patients. I like to say that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And it's important to try and ensure improved clinical outcomes. Something I see working with a number of corporates and startups, often we're identifying the wrong problem, right? And if we are identifying the right problem, we sometimes think of the wrong solution. So just because technology exists to allow us to do pretty much anything today doesn't mean we should. We should really focus on a problem that exists and really address it. Don't be a hammer looking for a nail, right? Actually find that nail. Technology is not a silver bullet. Don't forget it still boils down to resources and the human touch. So one of my favorite speakers is a gentleman by the name of Professor Abraham Varghese. And I always say this when I speak, that if you have 17 or 18 minutes during your day, just Google Abraham Varghese. And it's Abraham spelled A-B-R-A-H-A-M, and Varghese as in V-E-R-G-H-E-S-E. Google Abraham Varghese Human Touch or Abraham Varghese TED Talk. One of the most amazing talks I've ever heard, spot on with everything he's trying to get across. He was a professor at Stanford. He was known by many of his colleagues to come up with the term iPatient, just like there's an iPhone, because he got very angry with residents who started doing rounds in a room on the computer rather than going to the bedside and seeing the patient. So he said, it's not about the iPatient. Go and see the actual patient. So have a listen to that talk. Fantastic talk. On that, thanks very much, and happy to answer some questions at our next Q&A session. Thank you.